Coming up, this artist and his band were playing wherever they could when they got discovered. They got their big break while they were playing a gig inside of a bowling alley. In fact, they signed the record contract inside that same bowling alley about a month later. They hit the charts with fury, 6 consecutive gold hits, and they actually outsold the Beatles in 1968, if you can believe that. The artist and his former producer-songwriter tells us the story of their biggest hit, which has remained controversial all these years later because people don't listen to the lyrics. They just jump to conclusions. The story's coming up next. Hey, music junkies. Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, we interview the great artists of the rock and roll era, and you never know what's in store from day to day. So make sure to subscribe so you never miss out. Click the bell so you always know what's coming out. Check us out on Patreon as well. So I'm excited to bring you another episode from our series, Revelations. This is where featured artists go deep on their greatest songs and albums. In 1968, Gary Puckett and the Union Gap sold more records than the Beatles. He would finish the 60s with 6 straight gold hit singles, putting him in a category with very few artists from that time. Lady, and none of it went to his head. I had a chance to interview Gary and found him to be one of the most humble, seriously, down-to-earth people I've ever talked with. He had so many great stories, which you're going to hear next, including the story of his biggest hit ever, Young Girl. Young Girl has been the subject of some controversy over the years because people just refuse to listen to the words. They hear the chorus and jump to conclusions. It's actually about a guy who's smitten with a girl who gives him the impression that she's older than she is. When he finds out that she's underage, he tells her, no way. Get out of here. It's actually written by producer-writer Gary Fuller, whom I also interviewed, and that's coming up. Jerry had a massive hit with Ricky Nelson, Traveling Man. It was just used in Stranger Things, and it's been used in a lot of stuff lately. I'm a traveling man, made a lot of stops. Jerry Fuller also wrote and produced Show and Tell for Al Wilson, a great song from the 70s. Up next, both of them tell the story of this classic 60s hit, late 60s. As we get into this interview, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, my favorite frames ever. Make sure to take advantage of the phenomenal deals that Zenni always runs to design your own pair of frames. The color, the shape, the size, the style. All this is available at Zenni.com. Go check it out at the link below. Here is Mr. Gary Puckett with the story of Young Girl. Young Girl, the song that's most associated with Gary Puckett and the Union Gap. Again, written and produced by Jerry Fuller. This was a big song, went to number 2 in the Hot 100, went to number 1 on the Cashbox chart. A lot of people realize it was the Billboard charts, which is kind of what everybody recognizes, but the Cashbox charts, I always would look at the Cashbox chart as a kid because that was the seller. That was based on not just airplay of people, DJs and payola and all the things that were going on there, but this was what the public was buying. So to me, it was an important chart because it was the sales chart. It was a global hit, went to number 1 in the UK, went to number 1 in Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, number 2 in Australia and South Africa. Worldwide hit, re-released in the UK again in the 70s and went top 5 again.
That's right.
Isn't that so cool?
Yeah, you're a knowledgeable guy. I like this.
I just think that's amazing. It shows the staying power of a song like that when it can, in a completely different decade when things had changed. You're in 1974, you're in singer-songwriter, Zeppelin and some of these bands had come out, and to capture a completely new audience in the 70s. Very cool. I always like this trivia. It was number 2 behind Otis Redding, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. Sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide. And Honey. And honey, I miss you. Bobby Goldsboro. Capture for me, if you will, what were your thoughts when you're at number 2? I love to ask artists these things because when you're at number 2, you're hoping, were you feeling that way? What was the anticipation there?
I don't really recall hoping for number one, because I did see number one in Cashbox, like you said. And I guess I was just grateful and pleased, happy, that we had a highly charting record, because we were able to go out. In 1968, we did 268 concert days. That's a lot of concert days when you consider that you've got to have a few travel days out of the year. We would go and stay in New York City for months at a time and just take a limo service and drive out to colleges where we did a lot of our concerts. So it was a very, very busy but lucrative year. Being behind, we recorded Honey, put it on the Young Girl album, as you probably know.
And honey, I miss you.
I wasn't upset with Bobby beating us out. And of course, I was a huge Otis fan, and to see him leave this planet was really, really sad.
You're going to be number two to any song. I mean, sitting on the dock of the bay. It's just so classic. That's what was, again, so great about the 60s is you look at the top 10 of any week in the 60s, and like 5 or 6 of every one of those songs you hear, they're classics. They'll last for thousands of years, and just an incredible time.
With all the charms of a woman.
It's interesting because a lot of people think that Young Girl's controversial. I don't know back then because I wasn't living. People misunderstand it. It's actually not what people think it is.
Exactly true. Yeah.
Tell me about writing that, where that came from, and then the production of it.
I wrote it on the way back from the Monterey Pop Festival. I'd gone up there. It was a duty for everybody assigned or working for Columbia had to go. That was Clive Davis's instructions, right? We had to go there. And so we did it and had a wonderful time there. And came on the way back, I wrote that song.
Producing it, tell me about producing that and approaching that with Gary Puckett and the band.
I tried to sign Gary originally by himself. That's a voice. I heard that voice and I said, that's it. This is what I need. And he said, no. My boys, they're my boys. They're going, and I said, well, okay, suit yourself. I said, you can split that 7% up 5 ways instead of 1. It's up to you. And I tried to tell him I wasn't going to use them. I was going to use the Wrecking Crew. I knew these guys well. I knew they'd give me exactly what I wanted. And they got a little upset about that. Gary didn't at first, but I guess he stood by his guys again later on. And
the Union Gap.
Yep. But they didn't play or sing on any of those things, and just Gary. Because he had those golden pipes. So that's how that all happened.
Where did you record it at?
At Columbia Studio A. It was the second largest studio in town at the time, RCA being the first. And of course it was right there, right downstairs from my office. And it was easy to do. I had a great engineer by the name of Pete Romano. And Pete did all my stuff, which through Johnny Mathis, O.C. Smith, Andy Williams. I always got Pete.
Wow.
And he was great. And that studio was just had so many hits been cut in there. It was amazing.
What I love about that song is how it begins slow, and then you have that drum beat, and it builds from there to that great chorus.
Get out of my mind. My love for you is way out.
Young girl, kind of pretty. Get out of my mind. And then it started. I liked getting a shock, at the beginning. The disc jockey's really got to be watching where he put that needle down.
Young girl.
1968 was the year that we beat the Beatles. We outsold the Beatles that year.
Well, it also had a second run on the UK chart some years later in the 70s and went to number 6.
Do you believe that?
In those times, if I try to transport myself back, it's kind of difficult in retrospect. because, you have a lot of people who are considered to be really hip, the Stevie Wonders, the Paul Simons, the Elton Johns, the James Taylors and others, the Eagles, whatever. And I wasn't considered hip, I was considered, I don't know, not hip, pop and not hip, But fortunately, people liked my voice. And fortunately, a lot of people, as is displayed today by as much as I'm working out there in the world, liked the songs. I have 3 grandchildren, 8, 5, 3, and the newest one is only 14 months or 16 months or something like that. Anyway, the ones who are cognitive, they love Lady Willpower.
Lady Willpower, it's now.
Young Girl.
Girl, get out of my mind. My love.
Those are their favorites, and Woman is a close second. So it's really, really fun to realize all these years later that we created music that really withstands the test of time, and that's why I believe a lot of, as you said earlier in our discussion, that the music of that era was truly fantastic, and much of it I think will survive for a long, 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 long time.
Beneath your perfume and makeup.
Well, in Young Girl, it's not a song about a guy going after a young girl. It's a guy who misunderstands her age until later and then says, okay, you're too young, get away from me, kind of thing.
You led me to believe you're old enough.
Yeah, it's exactly true. And that's what I have to remind people of sometimes. But sometimes I just say, well, you didn't pay attention. So
Get out of here.
Yeah, go back and listen to the lyrics. It's a song, too, though, that, and these are happy accidents I know that happen, that you sing it then, it's kind of like that go-to song, the way they've used it in pop culture because of what it's saying, like Wonder Years.
And thusly.
And some of these are like, we need a certain song for this element. Oh, Young Girl, there you go. It's kind of one of those songs that fits that very well. It's just using Licorice Pizza as well.
yeah, and what was it? Glee had put it together with "Don't Stand So Close to Me."
Don't stand so close to me, young girl.
They were talking about how they are so similar in their intent and purpose. It's gratifying to be suddenly put into that hip place by people who really understand what it's all about, because soulfulness to me is not a lot of curly vocals and things. Soulfulness is being able to connect your head and your heart with somebody else. And they go, yeah, I get it,
And these first 2 singles, along with Lady Willpower, which we'll talk about next, they were great showcases for your voice. That's what I think that Jerry Fuller, I actually interviewed Jerry Fuller back a couple of years ago, and that's what he said. He said, we needed songs that would showcase Gary's incredible voice. That's where you discovered Gary Puckett.
Actually, I discovered me, so to speak. I'd always wanted to produce, and I've been working on demos. I had wanted to be a producer, and of course, that was my first production ever, was Lies by the Knickerbockers. I had that and my hits as a songwriter to take with me to try to get a job at Columbia Records. Jack Gold was the guy that I talked to, and he was familiar with my songwriting and my singing. They gave me a budget to go hit the road and find acts. And this was a place called the Quad Room. It was a bowling alley in San Diego.
Yeah, bowling alley.
Yep.
Wow.
So I showed up a night earlier and just snuck in and found a place over in the corner where I could hear good. Nobody could see me. And they were hitting the soft pedal. They were saving everything, all the energy for the next night, because they had this producer from Columbia Records. And so after just one set, I walked up and I said, "All right, boys." They said, "What are you doing here?" "Oh, you gotta stick around." I said, "I don't have to. I don't have to. I'll bring contracts next time I come down. Yeah, we got to make some hit records." And they said, "Great, but you got to hear it." "I'll hear it. I'll hear it. I'll hear it when you get up there." So that's how that started.
You're much too young, girl.
And that's why I think why these songs have lasted too, because this big bellowing voice and it's singable. A lot of people want to sing along to it. Young girl.
Very good. Yeah, I love it. Excellent voice.
Girl, get out of my mind.
When you can have a showcase for a voice like that and have a great song, that's a great formula.
So hurry home to your mama.
Yeah, it truly is. Jerry would always say it's the song and then the singer. He said a hit song is a hit song, but if you can dress it up properly, then you can't miss.
But like you said, a great vocal by Gary Puckett on Young Girl. Covers of it. I mean, there have been some famous covers, ABBA.
I especially liked the Glee version, right?
When they put it with Police, Don't Stand So Close
Don't
to Me.
stand so close.
Makes him cry beneath your perfume and me.
Well, a Hebrew version of it, a French version, French language and Hebrew language version of that
Yeah.
song. But that's when you know a song's going somewhere. And of course, it's been in Full House.
Dad, are you going through some kind of crisis?
An English rapper, Plan B, also referenced it in one of his songs.
Young girl, get out of my mind, I love you.
Then they use it in Zodiac. Well, and it was also used in Perfect Strangers, My Boyfriend's Back. It's been used in a lot of pop culture, especially in the 80s. And then now, it's like you said, it keeps coming back into, I guess, the culture. And it is also, it was covered by the Letterman as well.
With all the charms of a woman.
I'm going to look that one up. I don't know that I saw that. You know who else recorded Young Girl was Jerry Vale.
Kept the secret of your youth.
So when you were in that moment and all of this is happening, what are you thinking? Because I love talking to artists from the 60s. I got the sense from these amazing artists and writers and producers that there was this competition, but it was a friendly competition. It was about taking music to the next level. Brian Wilson heard Rubber Soul, and that's what inspired him to go after Pet Sounds and want to make a perfect record. And then the Beatles heard that, and they went after it with Sgt. Pepper. And then Lamont Dozier saying, "Man, I heard Michelle by the Beatles," and I was like, "Man, we gotta up our game." And then the Byrds, they would hear something, and so on and so forth. And it wasn't this, I want to beat these guys. It was this, wow, this has inspired me. I want to go write something great. Give me kind of a sense of that feeling, because you guys landed right kind of at the tail end from 64 to 69. That period was a renaissance. I mean, I just don't think we'll ever see something like it again.
Yeah, and I've always looked at it the way that you just described it. It wasn't a competition as far as I was concerned. It was all about what inspires you from somebody else to do what you're going to do next or something. So it was a great era. That's all I can say.
Much too young, girl.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Gary Puckett and the Union Gap and Jerry Fuller. Great 60s hit, Young Girl. What are your memories of the song, of Gary and his band? Let us know what other Gary Puckett hits that you think we should cover here. He had, like I said, 6 consecutive gold songs. This is really cool. And make sure to subscribe below if you want to be part of this community. We would love to have you. It's all about keeping the music alive. Until next time, 3 chords.